You dare challenge me, boy? You dare challenge me, boy?
The sun rose over the red earth, spilling golden light across the huts of the village. Smoke curled gently from morning fires, carrying the smell of roasted grain and sweet herbs. Children chased each other between the trees, their laughter mingling with the steady beat of wooden mortar pounding yam. This was not just a village, it was a place built on rhythm. Every sound, from the chatter of women at the well to the clatter of tools in the fields, carried a pulse that tied the people together. Here, music was more than entertainment. It was the bridge between the living and the dead. The villagers believed the ancestors walked among them when the drums called, and the rhythm opened the path between two worlds, a festival, a wedding, a burial. Nothing was complete without the sacred beat of the drum dot. At the heart of this proud community stood their leader, Chief Oki. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a voice that thundered like a storm. His presence commanded attention. When he spoke, no one dared to interrupt. Okimba carried himself like a king, his neck heavy with beads, his arms marked by scars of past battles. To his people, he was both protector and judge, yet behind his strength lay a hunger for control, a need to be seen as flawless. Pride was the fire that burned in his chest, and pride often made him cruel. Among the villagers was another figure, far different from the chief. His name was Kofi the lame drummer. His right leg dragged slightly when he walked, forcing him into a slow, uneven stride. Children sometimes whispered about his limp, calling him broken. Yet when Kofi sat before the drum, the limp was forgotten. His hands moved with a grace and power that silenced mockery. Each beat seemed to rise from the earth itself, filled with sorrow, joy, and something deeper, something that made even the oldest elders close their eyes and sway. To many, Kofi was a gift, but to Chief Okimba, he was a reminder of weakness. The chief would sneer at him in gatherings, making sly comments about a cripple daring to carry sacred drums. To Okimba, the sacred deserved perfection, not brokenness. He saw Kofi as a stain on the village's honor, yet Kofi never answered the chief's words. He bowed his head, bore the ridicule, and returned to his drum. Inside, his heart ached, but when he played, the pain became music. His rhythms told of struggle, of loss, of hope that refused to die. Few understood it, but the ancestors seemed to listen. Whispers spread among the people. When Kofi plays, the air feels different, as if unseen eyes are watching. Some believed his lameness was no curse, but a mark that the ancestors had chosen him to carry their voice. The chief scoffed at such talk. The ancestors would never choose the lame. He spat one evening, his words sharp enough to cut. But the winds that swept through the trees told another story, a story waiting to rise. The festival day arrived, bright and alive. From the earliest hour, the village stirred with excitement. Women decorated the square with palm leaves and clay pots painted in bright colors. Men set up fires for roasting goat and maize. Children ran barefoot in circles, their laughter rising above the hum of preparation. The air carried the scent of roasted meat, fresh palm wine, and flowers gathered from the fields. This was no ordinary festival. It was the sacred night when the people called to their ancestors. Drums would open the way, dances would honor the spirits, and the living would feel the nearness of the dead. No one dared miss it. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky in orange and red, the villagers gathered. Torches blazed around the square, throwing shadows that swayed like spirits already waiting. At the center stood the great drum, polished smooth with age, its skin stretched tight, ready to speak. Chief Okimba sat on a carved stool, draped in fine cloth, his chest gleaming with beads. His eyes scanned the crowd, sharp and proud, as if searching for any sign of disobedience. When he raised his hand, the square fell silent. "It is time," the chief declared, his voice rolling across the crowd. "Let the drums awaken the spirits of our fathers and mothers." All eyes turned to Kofi, the lame drummer. The elders had chosen him, as they always did, for his rhythms were unlike any other. Slowly, he stepped forward, his limp heavy but steady. In his hands he carried his smaller drum, the one that spoke with his soul. But before he could reach the center, laughter rang out. It was the chief. "Look at him," Okimba said loudly, making sure every ear heard, dragging his crooked leg across sacred ground. And yet he dares to call himself the voice of the ancestors. Some villagers laughed nervously, afraid of the chief's wrath. Others looked away, ashamed. Kofi stopped, his chest tight, but he kept moving. His eyes stayed on the drum, not the chief. Tell me, cripple Okimba continued, his words sharp as spears, do the ancestors dance to a broken rhythm? Can a lame man lead the spirits? The words struck like blows. Kofi's heart burned with shame, but he did not answer. He reached the drum, placed his hands on its skin, and closed his eyes. For a moment, silence hung heavy. Then the first beat rose soft, trembling, but alive. The second followed, then the third, weaving into a rhythm both sorrowful and strong. The sound carried across the square, stirring something deep within the people. The dancers stepped forward, their feet moving to his call, but the chief's face darkened. He could not bear the sight of the cripple commanding the crowd, holding the sacred moment in his hands. With a sharp wave, he stood. Enough, Okimba barked, his voice cut through the rhythm like a blade. He motioned to another young man, tall and strong. Let him take the drum. Let a man with strength honor the ancestors. Gasps spread through the crowd. The young man stepped forward nervously, bowing to the chief before taking the drum from Kofi's hands. Kofi's chest clenched as if a knife had pierced it. He had given the drum his heart, and now it was ripped from him before all to see. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some avoided Kofi's eyes, ashamed of their silence. A few women whispered, "This is not right." Yet no one dared challenge the chief. Kofi stood frozen, his hands empty. He felt stripped, exposed. His limp felt heavier than ever as he backed away, the whispers of pity and laughter cutting him deeper than any blade. His spirit shook, but his eyes, though filled with tears, still carried a quiet fire. The young substitute drummer began to play, his hands strong and steady. The rhythm was loud, powerful, but hollow. It lacked the soul, the ache, the truth that Kofi's beats carried. The dancers moved, but something was missing. The air did not stir, the ancestors did not answer. Kofi watched from the shadows, his heart broken yet burning. The chief's laughter echoed in his ears, but beneath the pain, a vow began to form. One day, the drum would speak again, and when it did, the ancestors themselves would decide who was worthy. The festival should have soared into glory. The drums should have lifted the dancers, the voices should have reached the sky, and the ancestors should have drawn near. Instead, the square grew restless. The young substitute drummer pounded with all his might, his arms strong, his body unbroken. His rhythm was fast and loud, but it was empty. It carried no story, no soul. The dancers tried to follow, stamping their feet and swaying their hips, but the steps felt stiff, clumsy. Their bodies moved, but their spirits did not. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some clapped out of duty, others forced laughter, but their eyes betrayed disappointment. They were waiting for something more, something that never came. But the chief's seat, Okimba forced a grin, his teeth shining in the firelight. He clapped his hands, shouting, "Dance, honor the ancestors, do not shame me with your laziness." But the truth was plain. The sacred moment felt hollow. The torches burned without flicker. The air stayed heavy, and no wind stirred. The people knew the signs. The ancestors had not come. Whispers spread like dry grass catching flame. Why are the spirits silent? Have we offended them? Is it because the cripple was cast aside? Okimba heard the murmurs. His jaw tightened, though he laughed loudly to drown them out. "The ancestors are testing us," he declared. "They want to see our strength, not weakness. Keep dancing." Yet, even as he spoke, he felt the weight of failure pressing on his chest. He had silenced the lame drummer, certain it would prove his authority. Instead, it was his own pride now being tested. Kofi stood in the shadows, his eyes burning with tears. His heart ached as he watched the empty performance unfold. The drum in the young man's hands beat loudly, but to Kofi it sounded like a hollow echo. He could feel the silence of the ancestors, thick and cold, pressing down on the square. When the last dance faltered to an end, the people did not cheer. They only looked at one another, uneasy and confused. For the first time in memory, the sacred night had failed. Okimba rose quickly, lifting his hands as though he could force the people into joy. "It is done," he announced with forced pride. "The ancestors have seen us. They are satisfied." But his words carried no weight. The people's silence told another story. That night, while others returned to their huts in disappointment, Kofi walked alone to the edge of the village. His limp dragged heavily on the dusty path, but he did not stop until he reached the sacred Tritha, oldest bale, whose roots sank deep into the earth like veins of memory. He sat beneath it, his drum on his lap. The firelight of the festival was far behind him now, replaced by the silver glow of the moon. The night was quiet except for the soft hum of crickets. For a long while, Kofi said nothing. His tears fell silently onto the drum's skin. "Am I truly unworthy?" he whispered to the darkness. "Am I nothing but a broken man holding broken rhythms?" His hands moved without thought. Slowly, he began to play softly, gently, as if afraid to disturb the night. The sound was different here, away from the crowd, away from the chief's scorn. Each beat carried his sorrow, each rhythm carried his longing. Then something strange happened. A breeze stirred, though the night had been still. The leaves of the sacred baobab rustled, whispering like voices too faint to understand. The air thickened, not with heat, but with presence. Kofi froze, his hands trembling. He looked up at the tree, at the stars beyond, his heart pounding. He could not see them, but he felt them. The ancestors were listening. For the first time that night, he smiled through his tears. His rhythms had not been lost. The silence of the square had not been the silence of the spirits. They had only been waiting for him. That night, beneath the ancient baobab, Kofi's soft rhythms carried him into sleep. His head rested against the drum, his tears drying on its skin. The breeze that had stirred the leaves seemed to cradle him, pulling him gently into dreams that were more real than waking life. He found himself standing in a vast plain lit, not by the sun or moon, but by a strange golden glow. The earth beneath his feet pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air hummed with sound-distant drums echoing from nowhere and everywhere. Shapes moved in the light, first shadows, then figures. They were tall, robed in flowing cloth, their faces strong and ageless. Some carried staffs, some wore crowns of feathers, others held drums like his own. Kofi's breath caught in his chest. He knew who they were, the ancestors. One stepped forward, a woman with eyes like burning coals. Her voice was both a whisper and a thunderclap. "Kofi, child of rhythm, why do you weep?" He fell to his knees, his hands shaking. "Because I am broken, because the chief mocks me, because I tried to call you, but the people did not hear." The ancestors circled him, their steps slow, their movements in perfect rhythm. Another voice, deep and heavy like rolling earth, answered, "You think your limp is weakness, but it is the mark that makes you chosen." Kofi lifted his head, tears still in his eyes. "Chosen? I can barely walk. How can I be worthy to carry the sacred beat?" The woman's voice softened. "The strong play the drum with their hands, but you play with your wounds, your longing, your heart. Your pain gives the rhythm its truth. Your struggle gives it power. The ancestors do not dance to strengths, they dance to truth." The words struck him deeper than any spear. He looked at his leg, the limp he had always hated, the source of his shame. Could it be the very thing that connected him to the spirits? As he watched, one of the ancestors placed a great drum before him, larger than any he had ever seen. Its skin gleamed as though woven from moonlight, and its sides were carved with symbols of the village. The ancestor gestured for him to play. Kofi hesitated, then struck the drum. The sound burst forth, not like music, but like life itself. Waves of rhythm rolled across the plain, shaking the ground, stirring the air. The ancestors began to dance, their feet stamping in patterns older than memory. Their laughter rose like thunder, their joy filling the sky. Kofi played faster, stronger, his limp forgotten. Every beat poured out his sorrow, his shame, his hope, and his love. He was no longer the lame boy mocked by the chief. He was the bridge, the one who could carry the voice of the ancestors into the world of the living. The woman placed her hand on his shoulder. "Remember this, Kofi. Your brokenness is your gift. Do not hide it. Do not let prideful men silence you. When the time comes, play, and we will answer." The vision faded like mist at sunrise. Kofi awoke beneath the baobab, the drum still in his lap, his heart pounding as though it had never stopped playing. The stars above seemed brighter, the wind gentler, the night alive with unseen watchers. For a long while, he sat in silence, letting the dream sink deep into his spirit. Then he began to practice. His hands moved slowly at first, then faster, shaping rhythms unlike any he had played before. They were not perfect, but they carried weight, each beat filled with the promise of what he had seen. He practiced until dawn, sweat glistening on his brow, his body aching but his spirit soaring. Every strike of the drum told his story, his limp, his shame, his awakening. The drum was no longer just an instrument. It was his voice, his strength, the extension of his very soul. As the first rays of sun touched the village, Kofi rose. His limp was still there, heavy as ever, but now he carried it with pride. What once chained him had become his crown. The chief's words still echoed in his memory, sharp and cruel, but the ancestors' promise echoed louder. And soon, he knew, the village would hear that promise too. The morning sun spilled across the village, gilding the roofs of thatched huts and the dusty paths where children played. The people stirred awake, but whispers were already in the air. Some had heard faint drumming through the night, rhythms that drifted on the wind like a heartbeat from the earth itself. No one could say where it came from, yet many swore they dreamed of ancestors dancing in their sleep. Chief Abrafo rose from his compound, his head held high, his leopard skin cloak trailing behind him. His pride had only grown since he had mocked Kofi. He believed he had proven his dominance, silenced a boy whose limp made him unworthy of respect. But when he stepped into the village square that morning, he noticed the murmur among his people. Their eyes no longer looked only to him, they darted toward the horizon, as though waiting for something unseen. The chief frowned. He summoned the elders. "What are the people whispering about?" he demanded. An elder, his beard white as ash, bowed respectfully but did not lower his eyes. "Some say the ancestors stirred last night. Some say they heard the drums speak in the darkness." The chief scoffed. "Dreams, nothing more. The ancestors answer only when I command the drummers. It has always been so." But doubt flickered in the crowd. Women carrying water jars paused to listen. Young warriors sharpening spears exchanged wary glances. Even the children, usually restless, stood still, their wide eyes fixed on the chief. That same morning, Kofi appeared on the far side of the square. His drum was slung across his back, his limp as visible as ever. But something about him had changed. His step was slow but steady, and his gaze carried a fire no one had seen before. He looked not like a boy hiding shame, but like a man carrying purpose. The villagers noticed. Their whispers grew louder. The chief's jaw tightened. He strode forward, his staff clutched in hand. "You dare show your face here again?" His voice cut across the square. Kofi bowed slightly, respectful yet unbroken. "I only wish to honor the ancestors, as all sons of this land must." The chief's eyes narrowed. He remembered the laughter, the way the people had mocked Kofi when he stumbled at the festival. That humiliation had fed his pride. He would not allow this boy to steal the people's awe. "Do you think you can summon them?" The chief sneered. "Do you think your twisted leg gives you power greater than mine?" Kofi said nothing. His silence spoke louder than words, unsettling the crowd. The chief raised his staff high. "If the ancestors favor you, let them prove it. Play before us all. Call them now, and let us see if your crippled hands can stir what mine commands." The challenge hung heavy in the air. Some gasped. Others leaned forward, eager, fearful. Kofi lowered his drum from his back. He placed it carefully on the ground before him. The villagers pressed closer, forming a circle. The chief crossed his arms, his mouth curled in disdain. But before Kofi could strike a single beat, the elder with the white beard stepped forward. His voice was soft, yet it carried, "Chief, take care. Pride is heavy, and it can blind even the strongest eyes. The ancestors dance not for those who boast, but for those who carry truth in their hearts." The chief's face flushed with anger. He slammed his staff against the earth. "Silence. I am the chosen of the ancestors. I will not be questioned in my own village." The crowd stirred uneasily. For the first time, the chief's authority seemed less certain, his confidence tainted by defensiveness. Kofi's hands hovered above the drum, trembling not with fear, but with the weight of what was coming. He remembered the dream, the voice of the woman with burning eyes. "When the time comes, play, and we will answer." The moment stretched taut, like the skin of the drum itself. The chief glared. The villagers held their breath. Then Kofi struck the first beat. It was soft, steady, like a heartbeat. The sound pulsed through the square, quieting even the restless children. He struck again, faster, deeper. The rhythm spread like ripples on water. People felt it in their chests, in their bones. The chief's mocking smile faltered. The drumming built, layer upon layer, carrying sorrow, strength, and truth. The villagers swayed without realizing it. Some closed their eyes, tears forming as memories of their ancestors filled them. The chief slammed his staff again, but his command to stop was swallowed by the rhythm. The people no longer looked to him. They looked to Kofi. And for the first time in many seasons, Chief Abrafo felt the ground beneath his pride begin to shake. The rhythm rolled through the village like thunder trapped inside the earth. Each strike of Kofi's hands grew stronger, more certain, as though unseen voices guided his every movement. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling not from fear, but from recognition. This was no ordinary drumming. The air thickened, charged with an energy that raised the hairs on their arms. The baobab leaves rattled, though no wind blew. Chickens scattered, dogs whimpered and crawled low to the ground, sensing what the humans could not yet see. Then came the silence. Kofi struck one final deep note, and the sound hung in the air longer than it should have, vibrating as if the world itself had become a drum. The crowd held their breath. The chief's face twisted in defiance, but his eyes betrayed unease. And then the earth moved. At the edge of the square, the ground cracked softly. Dust rose in thin spirals. A faint glow seeped upward, golden and otherworldly. Slowly, shapes began to emerge. First shadows, then bodies, wrapped in ancient robes, their faces strong and familiar. They were the ancestors, walking from the unseen world into the living. Gasps and cries broke out among the villagers. Some fell to their knees. Others shielded their eyes, unable to behold the glory before them. Children clutched their mothers, yet none fled. They knew this was not a curse, but a visitation. The first ancestor stepped forward, tall, regal, his eyes like fire. He carried a staff that glowed as though lit from within. Behind him came women adorned in beads, warriors with spears that shimmered, elders with hair like silver flames. The ancestors moved in rhythm, their feet striking the earth in perfect time with Kofi's drumming. The dead were dancing. The sound grew louder, though Kofi's hands never faltered. It was as if countless drums beat from within the earth itself, joining his own. The villagers swayed unconsciously, tears running down their faces. They felt their lineage alive around them, their mothers, their fathers, their forgotten bloodlines returned in glory. But not everyone rejoiced. Chief Abrafo staggered back, his staff trembling in his grip. "This is trickery," he shouted, his voice cracking. The ancestors would never answer to a cripple. His words fell flat. The ancestors did not look at him. Their eyes, glowing with eternal light, were fixed on Kofi. The elder with the white beard spoke softly, but his words carried like thunder. "Do you not see? Your pride has deafened you. The ancestors dance for truth, not for power, and the truth beats in the hands of this boy." The chief's face burned red with fury. He raised his staff as though to strike Kofi, but the ground erupted beneath his feet. A fissure split the earth, glowing with golden fire, and the chief stumbled backward, barely keeping his balance. The villagers gasped, some shouting for him to stop. Kofi's rhythm did not waver. His eyes were closed, his body moving with a grace that transcended his limp. He poured his soul into the drum, his shame, his longing, his love for the very people who once laughed at him, and the ancestors answered with joy. The square became a sacred place. The ancestors danced in circles, their movements telling stories of battles fought, harvests gathered, children born, and lives honored. With each step they reminded the living of who they were and where they came from. Some villagers began to join, hesitant at first. Then with abandon, mothers lifted their children into the dance. Warriors struck the earth with their spears in rhythm. Elders wept as they moved, their feet remembering steps learned in their youth. The chief stood apart, sweat pouring down his face, his pride cracking like the earth beneath him. The people no longer looked to him for guidance. Their hearts were bound to the rhythm of Kofi's drum. The ancestors' leader, the tall figure with the glowing staff, finally approached the chief. His voice was deep as the earth itself. "You mocked the child of rhythm. You scorned the gift the spirits themselves gave him. Pride has blinded you, Abra. Step aside, or be consumed by the weight of your own arrogance." The chief tried to speak, but his voice failed him. His staff slipped from his hand, clattering uselessly to the ground. Kofi struck one final rolling beat, and the ancestors raised their hands to the heavens. The golden glow blazed brighter, filling the square with light so pure it burned away doubt and pride alike. The dead danced in their full glory, and the living danced with them, united across generations. And in that moment, the people understood. The ancestors had not abandoned them. They had only been waiting for the right heart, the right hands, the right truth, and it had come through the boy they once mocked. The glow of the ancestors lingered in the air, a golden haze that clung to the earth even as their dancing forms began to fade. The villagers still swayed, their hearts pounding in rhythm with Kofi's last beats. The night was alive with tears, with the certainty that they had witnessed the sacred. But at the center of it all, Chief Abrafo stood trembling. His once mighty frame seemed smaller, swallowed by the light and the silence that followed. His staff lay abandoned in the dust, useless, forgotten. For the first time, the people did not look at him with fear. They looked at him with disappointment. The elders stepped forward, their faces grave. The oldest among them, a woman with braided white hair and eyes clouded with age yet clear in spirit, raised her voice. "The ancestors have spoken," she declared. "Their dance answered the hands of the lame drummer, not the voice of our chief. It is he who carries the rhythm of truth." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some villagers nodded, others wept openly, their hearts torn between loyalty to tradition and the undeniable vision they had seen. Chief Abrafo shook his head violently, his pride refusing to die. "No," he rasped, though his voice cracked. "I am the chief. I hold the power. I command the ancestors." But even as he spoke, the golden haze thickened. A figure emerged, once more the tall ancestor with a glowing staff. His eyes burned into the chief's soul. "You command nothing," the spirit thundered. "You mocked the sacred. You raised yourself above the people. You spat on the gift we gave." The earth shuddered. Abrafo fell to his knees, not by choice, but by the weight pressing down upon him in an invisible hand of judgment. His chest heaved, his face contorted between rage and terror. The elders spoke again, their voices united. "Chief Abrafo, you must bow before the boy you mocked, not for his sake alone, but for the sake of the village. Only then will balance be restored." The words cut deeper than any spear. To bow before the lame drummer, the boy he had ridiculed as worthless, was worse than death to his pride. But the people's eyes were upon him, and the ancestors' gaze burned like fire. Abrafo's body trembled. Slowly, painfully, he turned his head toward Kofi. The young drummer stood clutching his drum, his limp leg bent awkwardly, his face streaked with tears. He had not asked for this moment, yet it had come. The chief's lips quivered, his eyes brimmed with shame, and at last, his forehead touched the earth. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Never before had their chief bowed to anyone. In that single act, the great Abrafo was undone, his arrogance shattered like clay underfoot. Tears streamed down his cheeks, falling into the dust. The villagers watched in silence, the weight of history pressing upon them. Their leader, the man they had feared and obeyed, now knelt humbled before the very drummer he had scorned. The ancestors' glow softened, wrapping the square in warmth. The judgment was complete. Balance had returned, and as Kofi looked at the broken man before him, he understood this was not his victory alone. It was the victory of the people, the ancestors, and the truth carried in his rhythm. The night was quiet again, but it was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence that comes after a storm, when the air is washed clean and heavy hearts learn to breathe again. The glow of the ancestors slowly faded into the heavens, yet their presence lingered, felt in every heartbeat, every breath, every rustle of the leaves. Chief Abrafo still knelt in the dust, his forehead touching the earth. His shoulders shook with the weight of humiliation and shame. The villagers watched, their eyes shifting between the proud man brought low and the lame drummer who stood, drum cradled against his chest, tears streaming silently down his face. The elders spoke softly, almost in unison. "The ancestors have chosen. The rhythm belongs to the boy. Let him decide what path the village shall take." All eyes turned to Kofi. His heart pounded, not with triumph, but with the gravity of the moment. He could feel the power to break or to heal resting in his hands. The memory of the chief's mockery burned in him, the laughter, the scorn, the way he had been humiliated before all. It would have been easy to demand revenge. It would have been easy to cast Abrafo aside forever. But as his fingers brushed the skin of his drum, Kofi remembered the ancestors' dance. He remembered their joy, their light, their unity with the living. He remembered the stories told in their movements, of victories, of losses, of love and forgiveness passed down through generations. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire square. "I do not ask for the chief's punishment. I do not ask for his throne. I ask for healing. The drum is not for division. The rhythm is for all of us." A murmur rose in the crowd. Mothers clutched their children. Elders nodded with tears in their eyes. Even the warriors bowed their heads, humbled by the boy's mercy. Kofi took a deep breath and raised his drum once more. Slowly, gently, he began to play. The sound was softer. This time no thunder, no storm, only the steady heartbeat of the earth. The rhythm spoke not of judgment but of renewal, calling the people to rise, to mend what had been broken, one by one. The villagers began to dance again. Their movements were lighter now, their tears mingling with laughter. Children ran into the circle, clapping their hands. Elders swayed, their faces lifted to the sky. Even Chief Abrafo lifted his head, eyes swollen with shame, and watched the people he had once ruled with fear now moving freely in love. Kofi looked at him not with hatred, but with compassion. He struck the drum louder, and the rhythm wrapped around the chief like a second chance. Slowly, painfully, Abrafo stood. He did not rejoin as their ruler, but as one of them. With trembling steps, he too began to sway, shoulders hunched, tears falling freely. The villagers gasped, then cheered not for the chief, but for the miracle of unity. For the first time in years, they were one people, bound not by fear but by rhythm, by spirit, by the ancestors walking beside them. The night stretched long into dawn. The fire burned low, but the people did not tire. They danced until the stars faded, until the first light of the sun crowned the earth. Kofi stood at the heart of it, all still lame, still marked by life's cruelty, but now the unshakable bridge between the broken and the divine. His rhythm was no longer his alone. It belonged to them all, and as the village moved as one body, one spirit, one song, the ancestors smiled unseen, knowing their children would never forget. The weakest among them had carried the strongest truth.